My brother looked me in the eyes and said must be hard figuring things out after bragging about his new condo for the 5th time at dinner. So I replied must be exhausting making up your success story. I wasn't planning to go to the reunion that year. I hadn't been to one since 2017, and even back then, I remember sitting in the corner with a plastic plate of pasta salad, wondering if my parents would ever stop introducing my brother as the successful one. But my Uncle Larry called me the week before, said it was the first time in a while the whole family would be in town, said he missed seeing me around. He always was the only one who seemed to actually listen when I talked, so I told him I'd think about it. Ended up showing up late, parking half a block away, and debating in the car whether I should just drive off. I don't know what made me stay. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself that I could be around them and not feel like a ghost. Or maybe I just wanted to see how bad it would be this time. Anyway, my name's Jordan. I'm 33, technically the oldest, though you wouldn't know it from the way my parents treat my brother Ryan. He's 2 years younger, louder, flashier, and always knew how to make a room bend around him. I used to think I was just quieter, more observant. Later I realized I'd been trained to shrink myself from a pretty early age. Growing up, everything Ryan did was praised even when it made no sense. He got a B in algebra once and Mom called it a huge improvement. I got an A and heard, "Well, of course you did. You're the studious one." He broke the coffee table wrestling with his friend and got boys will be boys. I cracked a plate while helping with dishes and got grounded for not being careful. I stopped trying to impress them by the time I was 16. Ryan went to college for exactly 2 semesters, dropped out after getting a business idea with a couple friends. That idea flopped within a year, but somehow the blame got twisted into they just weren't ready for someone with vision like Ryan's. After that, he bounced around jobs, sales rep, fitness coach, crypto advisor. Every time he switched gigs, my parents acted like it was nothing. He's networking, Dad would say. He's chasing opportunity. Meanwhile, I was grinding through grad school, taking night shifts at the grocery store to make rent. And when I told them I'd gotten a full-time job with decent benefits, Mom said, "Well, that's nice. But have you thought about starting something of your own like your brother?" So, yeah, that's the family dynamic. I wasn't jealous of Ryan, at least not in the way people assume. I didn't want his personality or his lifestyle. I just wanted some recognition that I wasn't invisible. That working hard counted for something, even if it didn't come with a flashy title or an Instagram highlight reel. By the time I walked into the reunion, the backyard was already full. Fold-out tables, paper lanterns, buffet trays that had gone lukewarm. My cousin Jenna waved when she saw me. My uncle handed me a beer. For a minute it felt normal, until I heard his voice, Ryan's voice, carrying across the yard like it always did. He was holding court near the grill talking about his new condo. "Downtown top floor," he said. 2 bedrooms, but I knocked out the wall to make one massive studio space. You got to see the view, floor-to-ceiling windows. You feel like a king. Mom was beaming next to him like she'd bought the place herself. He negotiated it all himself, she told Aunt Deb. Even got them to throw in the appliances. He just knows how to talk to people. I stood there with my drink, not really in the mood to interrupt whatever victory lap he was doing. But of course he spotted me eventually. "Hey, look who crawled out of his hole," he called out loud enough that a few heads turned. He always did that, framed every greeting like a jab. I just smiled and walked over. "Good to see you too, man," I said. I meant it in a way. It had been over a year. He gave me the once-over eyes, flicking down to my shoes. Still figuring things out, he asked, that smug tilt in his voice that made it sound like a joke. But only technically. I shrugged, just keeping busy. And that would have been the end of it, except Uncle Larry, bless him, chose that moment to wander over and overhear the tail end. He chuckled and said, "Busy buying up half the block your condo's on." The silence was instant. You could feel it crack the air. Ryan blinked. "Wait. What?" Uncle Larry just sipped his beer, clearly enjoying himself. "Jordan's company. You didn't know that new dev firm that bought those 3 commercial lots on Main? That's him. I hadn't planned on anyone here finding out. I hadn't told them. I'd been building something on the side for 3 years, quietly, carefully, after work and on weekends. I never posted about it, never talked about it in group chats. I didn't think they'd be interested. And now suddenly, the grin slid off Ryan's face like someone pulled the rug out from under him. I gave a tight smile. "It's nothing, just a little real estate." Ryan stared at me, then looked at Mom. She blinked like she was trying to recalculate everything she thought she knew about me. I could see the gears turning, see the moment it hit, that they didn't know the whole picture anymore. That maybe they never did, and that's when things really started to change. Because Ryan, he doesn't take well to being outshined, especially not by the brother he spent years looking down on, not when Mom and Dad are watching. And over the next few weeks, he made that very, very clear. The next morning, I woke up to 5 missed calls and 2 texts from my mom. One said, "Can we chat?" The other just said, "Please call me when you're free." Dad, too. No good morning. No, how are you? No reference to the reunion. I stared at the screen for a minute, then put the phone down. I already knew what the call was going to be about. They weren't calling to say they were proud of me. They weren't calling to ask why I'd never told them what I was working on. They were calling because Ryan went home with a bruised ego, and now they had to clean it up. I waited until after lunch to call back. My mom answered on the first ring. "Jordan," she said too fast. "Honey, we didn't know. Why didn't you say anything?" I kept my voice flat. "Didn't think you'd be interested." "Of course we would have," she said, offended like I'd accused her of something. "We always want to hear about what you're doing." I didn't say anything. Just let the silence hang. She filled it. "It's just that Ryan's always been more open about his plans. He likes to share. You've always been more private." That was her version of things. I'd stopped sharing because whenever I did, the response was either indifference or a quick redirect to whatever Ryan was doing that week. But I didn't say that. I knew it wouldn't land. Dad got on the line next. "Your mom told me what Larry said." He began like I was a suspect. "You're buying property." "Yeah," I said. "We closed on 2 buildings last quarter. Working on a 3rd. There was a pause. "Well, that's something," he said finally. "I guess we were just surprised. It's a lot of money to be throwing around." "I didn't throw anything," I said calmly. "It's not just me. I have partners. We've been planning this for years." Another pause. Then Mom again. "Well, we're proud of you, sweetheart. Really." She said it like someone reading off a card. They hung up after that, and I didn't hear from them again for 2 weeks. No check-in, no questions, nothing. But Ryan? He made sure I heard from him. It started with a message. A screenshot, actually. One of my business's public listings on some commercial property site with a red circle drawn around my name. He didn't say anything, just sent the image. I replied yes. He said, "Wow, you really went full suit and tie, huh?" I didn't answer. 2 hours later, he followed up with, "Don't forget where you came from." That was always his favorite thing to say when I accomplished something he didn't know about. Like success meant betrayal. Like I owed him an explanation for working quietly instead of bragging every step of the way. I ignored him, but then came the calls to our parents. "Did you know Jordan's buying up buildings that used to be family-owned businesses?" he told Mom, according to my cousin Jenna. Kind of sad, honestly. "He said he's revitalizing the neighborhood," he told Dad. "But all I see is him playing Monopoly while people get displaced." He made it sound like I was bulldozing orphanages. In reality, the properties we bought had been vacant or foreclosed for years. One of them still had vines growing through a broken window. Another had squatters and 3 eviction notices taped to the front door. We weren't gentrifying. We were restoring. But that didn't matter to Ryan. What mattered was that for the first time I'd done something big, and he wasn't the one being celebrated. It wasn't just talk either. He started showing up to random places he never used to care about. One Saturday, I walked into a zoning meeting and found him already seated in the back row, flipping through the agenda with a smug look on his face. "Just staying informed," he said when I asked what he was doing there. A week later, a rumor started floating that my firm was connected to some shady investor out of state. I traced the source back to a real estate blog Ryan used to write for. An anonymous tip submitted with just enough detail to raise eyebrows. It didn't go anywhere, but the intent was clear. He wanted to paint me as a sellout. Meanwhile, my parents suddenly started inviting me to everything. Family dinners, brunches, even a weekend trip upstate. At first, I thought they were trying to make up for lost time. Maybe they realized they'd been unfair. Maybe they wanted to reconnect. But then I noticed how every invitation came with a tag. "Ryan will be there too." Or, "You can give your brother some advice, maybe." Or, the worst one, "He's been a little down lately." You know how he gets. That's when it clicked. They weren't reaching out because they wanted to see me. They were trying to smooth Ryan's ego through proximity. If I showed up and acted humble, maybe he'd feel big again. Maybe things would go back to normal. I wanted a one dinner, just one. I brought a bottle of wine, tried to be civil, tried to let things slide. But halfway through the meal, Ryan asked loud enough for the whole table to hear, "So Jordan, when are you going to let me buy in on one of your projects? I mean, I've got cash. Or is it some kind of secret club thing?" I looked at him. "We don't take investors who don't show up." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means we work. We don't just throw money at things and hope it turns into content." He laughed like it was a joke, but he didn't smile after. Mom changed the subject. Dad asked if anyone wanted more salad. and the rest of dinner was eaten with knives scraping a little too hard against ceramic plates. After that, I stopped accepting invites. 3 weeks passed. I kept my head down, focused on the properties. One of them finally cleared inspection. We signed a lease with a local bookstore owner, someone who'd been displaced from the same block 10 years ago. It felt good, tangible, like something real in a sea of posturing. Then I got a call from our contractor. The second building, the one on 4th and Main, had been flagged for code violations. Someone had submitted a report with photos claiming improper asbestos removal and unsafe scaffolding. There was an official inquiry, a delay, a headache. But here's the thing. We hadn't even started asbestos removal. The scaffolding hadn't even gone up yet. The photos were old, outdated from before we even bought the place. We traced the report back to a burner email, but the photos, they'd been taken from a very specific angle from the rooftop parking garage across the street, a spot Ryan had used in a video once when he was filming some hustle vlog about property scouting. I didn't say anything, not yet. I wasn't going to accuse him without proof, but something inside me shifted. A weight I hadn't known I was still carrying. I wasn't just dealing with a jealous sibling. I was dealing with someone who genuinely didn't want me to succeed. And worse, someone who thought he was entitled to what I'd built. Who saw my work not as my own, but as a prize he wasn't given first dibs on. A week later, he posted a motivational reel on his socials. Shirt half unbuttoned, skyline behind him. The caption said, "There are wolves who build empires quietly. And then there are sheep who buy buildings with other people's money and call themselves kings." I watched it twice. The comments were full of praise. People who had no idea who it was about, but I did. And I knew then that he wasn't going to stop. Not until something forced him to. Not until someone showed him exactly how far off the mark he really was. And that's when the idea first started forming. Slowly, quietly. Not revenge, not yet, just awareness. That maybe it was time to stop hiding what I'd built. Maybe it was time to stop letting him rewrite the narrative. I didn't act right away, but I started making calls. And that's when things really started to shift. It happened faster than I expected. A letter arrived at the office, certified mail, official looking, with a city seal on the envelope. At first, I thought it was about the zoning adjustment we'd filed for one of the corner lots. Something procedural. But inside was a notice of investigation. Anonymous complaint. Allegations of backdoor bidding, non-disclosure of financial conflicts, improper handling of funds. All completely false, but loaded with just enough legal jargon to require a response from our counsel. My stomach dropped. We'd done everything by the book. Every loan signed with full transparency. Every partner listed publicly. Every license approved and verified. But in real estate, perception carries weight. And someone didn't need to prove guilt. They just needed to raise enough suspicion to slow us down. I knew who it was. I didn't say it out loud, not to my partners, not to my assistant, not even to myself at first, but I knew. Ryan had crossed the line from passive sabotage to calculated interference, and I had no way to prove it. 2 days later, our biggest project investor backed out. Nothing personal, he told me over the phone, but we can't afford bad press right now. It's election season. You understand? Yeah, I understood. My name wasn't in the papers. No one accused me publicly, but behind closed doors, conversations started shifting. Calls went unanswered. Emails got delayed. The contractor for our third property paused work, citing pending clarification. The property we were about to lease to a nonprofit cafe got stuck in permitting limbo. Our bank requested a second audit. Our accountant stopped smiling when he walked in. And through all of it, I kept going. I showed up every day. I answered every call. I spoke with lawyers, filed appeals, wrote statements, and documented every expense I could find. But behind the scenes, I was unraveling. I barely slept. I stopped going to the gym. I ate whatever was closest, usually nothing until 3 p.m., then whatever greasy food I could grab during meetings. My apartment became a maze of unopened mail and coffee cups. I ignored friends' texts, stopped returning calls. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. Then the city temporarily froze our permits. Just like that, everything I'd built ground to a halt. I remember sitting in the office that night. Everyone else had gone home. The lights were dim, just the glow of my monitor and the low hum of the air vent above me. I stared at the screen for a long time, watching an error message blink on a file I tried to upload. I thought maybe this is it. Maybe I pushed too hard. Maybe I wasn't built for this. That was my rock bottom. And Ryan, he was thriving. He'd started a podcast, The Hustle Mindset. First episode featured him solo walking around his condo with AirPods in, talking about toxic work ethics and knowing when to pivot. In the second episode, he casually mentioned he was looking into acquiring distressed properties. I nearly threw my phone across the room. He was circling like a vulture waiting for what I'd built to collapse so he could pick through the bones and claim some of it for himself. That's when I stopped sleeping altogether. 3 days later, I woke up in my desk chair to a dull ache in my neck and a text from my old professor, Dr. Varma. She hadn't messaged me in over a year. It just said, "Saw your name come up in a council committee meeting. Want to talk?" We met for coffee that afternoon. She still looked the same sharp glasses, calm voice, the kind of person who never rushed a sentence. She didn't pry, just let me talk. I told her everything, not about Ryan, not directly, but about the smear tactics, the pressure, the walls closing in. She listened quietly, then said something I didn't expect. "You know, Jordan, when you were in grad school, you once told me your goal wasn't to be rich. You said you wanted to build things that outlasted you." I stared at her, surprised she remembered. She continued, "This feels like the kind of moment people either collapse under or grow out of." She slid a business card across the table. A name I recognized, a community redevelopment firm that had quietly built dozens of successful projects in the city without ever grabbing headlines. "They're good people," she said. "You're not the only one who's ever been stonewalled by the machine." That conversation flipped something in me. It didn't fix things overnight. I still had to deal with the investigation. The lawyer fees were draining our cash reserves. My partners were anxious. One of them started floating the idea of selling our stake in the fourth and main property to cut losses. I told him no, then told him again, but I also started shifting gears. I called the redevelopment firm. They weren't hiring, but they were open to partnerships. I pitched them a collaboration, one of our properties as a pilot project, a shared vision. They liked the idea. We started sketching things out. I stopped trying to control the narrative. Let Ryan rant online if you wanted. I didn't respond. Didn't defend myself. Instead, I started showing my work. I invited local reporters, not the big flashy outlets, but the neighborhood newsletters and nonprofit blogs to tour the properties. I let the bookstore owner tell his story. Let the cafe owner walk them through her dream. I didn't ask for praise, just visibility. I reached out to the tenants of the adjacent buildings and offered discounted maintenance in exchange for testimonials. I sat in on community board meetings and listened not as a developer, but as a neighbor, and slowly the tide shifted. The city unfroze our permits. The second audit came back clean. The nonprofit cafe posted a video thanking us, and it went mildly viral, shared by a few local influencers, picked up by a lifestyle blog. People started calling again. Investors, small ones, but steady. Local artists, former tenants, a retired couple, looking to back projects with a soul. I started sleeping again. I cleaned my apartment, went back to the gym, called my friends, sat in the park one afternoon, and actually breathed without my chest feeling tight. The funniest part, Ryan never acknowledged any of it. He kept posting, kept hinting, kept circling, but he never said a word about what I was doing because he didn't understand it. Still doesn't. To him, success is about optics, buzzwords, appearances. To me, it started becoming something else entirely. And by the time he showed up at the next family dinner, eyes darting, tone defensive, I was no longer in his orbit. I'd stepped off the carousel. But what happened at that dinner? That's where everything broke wide open, and that's where this story really takes a turn. It was my Uncle Larry who dropped the first clue. The family dinner was at my parents' place, one of those rare, full turnout events. Cousins, aunts, too many folding chairs, and not enough room. My mom had gone overboard with the appetizers, and Dad kept hovering around the grill even though we weren't eating steak. It was that kind of night. Ryan showed up 15 minutes late in a tailored jacket. He didn't take off, dark sunglasses he didn't need, and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. I watched him work the room. He was dialed down but still posturing, talking fast, name-dropping a recent meeting downtown, and waving off questions with vague little teases like, "You'll see soon." I knew that tone. He was building anticipation for something. But this time, I wasn't on edge. I'd spent the past few months in a completely different rhythm, working quietly, gaining support from people who didn't need flash to understand value, and it had recalibrated me. I was still angry. Of course I was. But the panic was gone. I didn't flinch when he talked over me. I didn't shrink when my parents praised him for getting a great deal on that used Range Rover. I just watched and waited. Uncle Larry sat next to me during dinner. Halfway through his coleslaw, he leaned over and muttered, "You know he's trying to get funding for that incubator thing, right?" I looked at him. "What incubator thing?" Larry wiped his mouth with a napkin. "He's calling it a creative workspace/business hub. Wants to lease one of those old lots on Hawthorne and flip it into a branded co-working space. Said he already pitched it to a few tech guys. I blinked. The lot on Hawthorne had been vacant for years, zone-like commercial city-owned, and historically difficult to flip because of the neighboring easement clause. I knew this because I tried to buy it 6 months earlier and got turned down. The city wanted community-focused development, not speculative ventures. So if Ryan was trying to lease it and getting meetings, someone on the council must have changed their mind, or someone had misrepresented what he was doing. I kept my face neutral and nodded. The rest of dinner was uneventful, unless you count Ryan fake laughing every time someone mentioned the cafe project I was working on. When I stood to say goodbye, my mom hugged me a little too tightly and whispered, "It's good to see you doing well, sweetheart. Just don't forget where you came from." The words echoed same tone Ryan used like success was a betrayal. I drove home thinking about that lot on Hawthorne, and the next morning, I called a friend who owed me a favor. Malik worked in urban planning and had access to the city council's committee minutes. We'd crossed paths years ago during a panel about affordable housing, stayed in touch loosely. I sent him a message. "Hey, random ask. Has there been any movement on that Hawthorne lot? Heard someone's trying to lease it for an incubator project." 10 minutes later, he sent me a PDF, a proposal, 1-page, no letterhead. It described the venture as a minority-focused community empowerment hub with strong mentorship partnerships and microgrant funding. There were no names listed, but the layout style, the phrasing, the fake buzzword, salad of impact-first innovation, and locally rooted brand architecture, it had Ryan written all over it. And I knew exactly who helped him write it. His on-again, off-again girlfriend, Celine, was a freelance consultant who specialized in mission-first language for brands that didn't actually care about any mission. I'd seen her slides before: slanted sans serif fonts, vague testimonials, stock photos of smiling kids planting trees. I called Malik again. "Who submitted this?" He paused. "Officially no individual, but it came through a shell company, New Roots Collective." My breath caught. I knew New Roots, or at least I knew the LLC Ryan had bragged about setting up last year just in case something took off. It was him. He'd rebranded himself again this time as a community-first advocate. I should have laughed. Instead, I got quiet because I knew what he was doing, and I knew how easy it would be for him to sell the story if no one dug deeper. So I started digging. I found the proposal file path in the PDF Malik sent, a shared cloud folder. The metadata still had the original author name, R.F. Ryan Fisher. I took screenshots. I saved every version. Then I looked up the LLC registry for New Roots Collective. The address listed a UPS store mailbox, and the phone number, a Google Voice number that redirected to a voicemail with Ryan's voice, asking people to leave a message for New Roots. I spent the next 4 days building a file. Timeline of the LLC registration. Screenshots of social media accounts promoting the upcoming project. Celine's website where she listed New Roots as a client under the heading Community Transformation. I found a local podcast where Ryan had gone on as a guest the month before. At the 1433 mark, he said, "Yeah, I'm working with the city on a creative empowerment space. It's going to uplift folks who've been left behind. That's the whole point." I clipped it, saved it. Then I made one more call. Elena. She ran a nonprofit that provided grants to BIPOC small business owners. We'd collaborated once on a workshop series, and I knew she sat on the city's Community Development Oversight Board, the same board that would have to approve any long-term lease of city-owned lots. I invited her to coffee. She showed up in a wool coat and no makeup the same way she always did. I didn't sugarcoat it. I laid it all out. Showed her the proposal, the fake LLC, the video clips, the podcast. She looked through everything slowly, eyebrows inching higher. When she was done, she closed her laptop. "That lot's still in review," she said. "No vote yet. They've been fast-tracking applications if they use the right language. You're saying this whole thing is performative?" I nodded. He's never worked with a community org. He doesn't have mentorship programs. His collective is a mailbox, and his idea of empowerment is probably selling overpriced desk space to his influencer friends. She leaned back. "Would you submit a competing proposal?" I blinked. "I wasn't planning to." "You should. You have the experience, the projects, the real relationships. I've seen your work. If you show up to the next committee hearing and say this out loud, I guarantee people will listen." That was the moment I realized I didn't have to fight Ryan on his terms. I didn't need to outmarket him. I just needed to outlast his performance. So I spent the next week putting together something real, a revised proposal, community letters, photos of the cafe project, data on local income gaps, and economic displacement testimonials from tenants. I named the proposal the Block Project, and under leadership, I listed every partner by name. No shell companies, no gloss. I printed it on plain paper. On the morning of the committee meeting, I dressed in my usual button-down and black coat. I didn't wear a watch or bring a presentation. I just showed up. Ryan was there. Of course he was. He was seated in the third row wearing designer glasses and a branded hoodie with the New Roots logo stitched in cursive. Celine was beside him, holding a binder. He didn't notice me at first, but when the board chair said, "We'll now hear from Jordan Fisher of the Block Project," he turned, and I saw it. That flicker of confusion, then irritation, then something close to fear. I smiled. Not smug, not triumphant, just calm. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't reacting. I was choosing, and I was about to speak the truth under oath on record, and in front of the very people he thought he could charm into giving him something he hadn't earned. I stepped up to the microphone with my hand steady. There were 10 people on the committee. Some I recognized, most I didn't. A few held pens over clipboards. One was already typing. Ryan stared from the third row with a neutral expression he was clearly forcing to hold. Celine looked down and whispered something under her breath. I introduced myself simply. My name is Jordan Fisher. I'm a partner at 4th Street Collective. We currently own and operate several community-focused redevelopment sites, including a local bookstore, a nonprofit cafe, and low-cost artist workspaces in Ward 5. I'm here today, not just to propose a project, but to speak to the importance of honesty when we talk about community. Then I laid out the truth. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just with precision. I passed out a packet-clear documentation of our work testimonials from current tenants, letters from small business owners who'd been pushed out of the neighborhood years ago and were now returning because we offered space at under-market rates with capped rent increases. Then I slid forward the second packet, a different kind of documentation. The New Roots collective registration tied to a mailbox. The burner phone Celine's branding work lifted word for word into Ryan's proposal. The LLC's complete absence from any real local collaboration. The audio clip of Ryan on the podcast. The photos of him touring the lot before any proposal had been publicly acknowledged. I didn't use his name not once, but it was all there. The room shifted, not loudly, not visibly, but I saw it. Committee members stopped scribbling and started reading. One of them furrowed their brow and exchanged a glance with Elena. Another turned to the board chair and whispered something. "Let me be clear," I said, voice steady. "I'm not here to attack anyone, but I believe we have a duty, not just as developers, but as residents, to ensure these community initiatives are led by people who have a history of serving, not just branding." Someone in the back clapped. Just one person, but it echoed. Afterward, I stepped out of the hearing room into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind me, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Ryan followed 30 seconds later. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there with his hands in his hoodie pocket watching me. "You planned that," he finally muttered. "I submitted a proposal," I said. "You submitted a marketing pitch. We both played our parts. You had Elena wrapped around your finger. I had receipts." He laughed once, short and bitter. "You think this is going to make you the hero? You think this is some kind of revenge story?" I didn't answer because I didn't need to. That week, the board voted unanimously. The lot on Hawthorne went to the Block Project, and with it came a grant to develop not just one, but 2 adjoining properties with affordable leases reserved specifically for first-generation entrepreneurs and family-run businesses displaced by urban sprawl. Ryan didn't show up to the follow-up meeting, but I heard from Jenna a few days later. Apparently, a few of his tech guys had seen the hearing clip online. It had been picked up by a local journalist who highlighted the shift in the city's approach to values-based urban development. The article didn't name him, but the language made it pretty obvious who tried to sell a brand without substance. His funding dried up. Celine pulled her name off the New Roots site and removed it from her portfolio. Ryan quietly deleted the social media accounts associated with the brand. Then he went dark for a while. My parents didn't bring it up, not for a while at least, but eventually I got the call. Mom's voice was quieter than usual. "Your brother's going through a rough time," she said. "He feels pushed out like no one's giving him a chance." "I gave him chances," I replied. "He used them to tear me down." Silence on the line. "Then you've changed." I smiled even though she couldn't see it. "I know." After that, things didn't return to normal. Not exactly. Family dinners were different, smaller. Ryan stopped attending. When he did show up to one a few months later, he sat near the edge of the group. No loud entrances, no big announcements. He offered a stiff nod when he saw me. I nodded back. We didn't speak, but we didn't need to. The Hawthorne lot broke ground 6 weeks later. I didn't throw a big ceremony, no ribbon cutting, just a quiet walk through the space with our new tenants. An older couple starting a Puerto Rican bakery, a first-gen artist launching a screen printing co-op, a nonprofit that planned to run free weekend classes for kids. It wasn't flashy, it was real. And Ryan. He went back to podcasting, but the tone changed. No more Kings and Wolves, no more condo tours or motivational reels, just smaller clips, quiet interviews. A video titled, What I Learned from Losing. He never mentioned my name. I never needed him to because revenge wasn't about humiliation. It was about clarity, about building something honest and watching it stand when the noise finally faded. I walked the block that weekend, passed by the cafe, the bookstore, the new mural going up on the side of the Hawthorne lot. And as I turned the corner and watched the sun catch the windows of the building I once thought I'd lose, I smiled because the people who once looked right through me were now walking into places I helped create, and I didn't need to be seen to feel seen. I'd become undeniable.